Grim Dawn crossbow bills, yeah.
Hello everyone, welcome to Grim Dawn Crossbow Builds, where all we talk about are crossbow builds for Grim Dawn. Our character today is a Reaper, which is the combination of a Nightblade and a Necromancer, and the crossbow we're using is the Spectral Arbalest, which supports Phantasmal blades, the Vitality non-cooldown version. This is a magnificent leveling build, and I had a really good time with this character. Before I do a dummy kill, I'll say that this character relies on the Scales of Alkama devotion for energy regen, so we are going to run out of energy before the dummy dies. When you're being hit by enemies, this won't be an issue because your energy will regenerate whenever you get hit. I'll turn on the Pneumatic Burst buff, cast a Bone Harvest to get the Soul Harvest buff, and fire away with Phantasmal blades. We're also using Siphon Souls on right click. And as you can see, this is absolutely terrible for energy cost. There it goes. But you get the idea. Let's discuss our skills. This character's main skill is Phantasmal Blades, which of course is at the hard cap. It's bound to Will of Ratosh, which is our Vitality Resistance Reduction devotion. And we are using Frenetic Throw, which gives full Pierce to Vitality conversion and eliminates the cooldown. The two modifiers are just above the soft cap. Heartseeker is fairly simple, giving more Vitality and bleeding damage. Nether Edge is more complex because it gives us a bunch of cold and chaos damage which we have to convert to Vitality. Thankfully, it also gives a large amount of crit damage. Our healing ability, Pneumatic Burst, is just above the soft cap, giving us OA, health regen, and total speed in addition to the heal. Shadow Dance is also a little bit above the hard cap, providing DA, a chance to avoid attacks, and trap resistance. You can put a point into Elemental Awakening if you like. That gives you Frostburn damage, which will be mostly converted to Vitality Decay, and some elemental resistance. Veil of Shadow is just below the hard cap, reducing enemy offensive ability and speed. This is also our trigger for the Giant's Blood health regen proc. And we have 1 point in Night's Chill for a little extra tick damage. This cold damage is mostly converted to Vitality. Phantasmal Armor is at the soft cap, giving us some energy leech, some flat armor, which is really nice because it applies to all of our armor slots, and some reduced freeze and petrify duration. Anatomy of Murder is sitting at 15 points. This is very helpful because we do entirely Vitality and bleeding damage. The bonus to Cunning and the damage to humans is also nice. As for the Necromancer, the main skill over there is Siphon Souls, which pairs very nicely with Phantasmal Blades. It also does Vitality damage. It's bound to the Rend ability, giving bleeding resistance shred. Its modifier, Blood Boil, is at the hard cap, giving bleeding damage, Vitality decay damage, and a penalty to enemy OA. Our exclusive aura is Harbinger of Souls, giving lots of Vitality damage and casting speed. Phantasmal Blades scales with casting speed, not attack speed, so that's what we're looking for. The aura gives both anyway. This middle row of skills is optional. If you don't want to have an extra button to press, you can safely leave this out, but it does give a big damage boost. We have 1 point in the base skill, which triggers Twin Fangs, 1 point in Dread for some extra range and the chance to confuse, and 15 points in Soul Harvest, because this buffs our main attacks. Then we've got 1 point in Ill Omen for the reduced target's damage and to trigger Wendigo's Mark, 1 point in Call of the Grave for some extra crit damage every now and then, and Spectral Binding is hard capped, giving us lots of health and OA, as well as a place for the Tip the Scales proc to go. Its modifier, Spectral Wrath, is our main source of Vitality resistance reduction. And now for our devotions. As I mentioned in the intro, this build needs the Scales of Alkama in order to function, so this is going to be the first goal. Phantasmal Blades absolutely wrecks the early game, but it also costs a lot of energy. You're always going to be out of energy until you can get this devotion. It gives a lot of energy leech when you get hit, and it gives generic resistance reduction as well. Unfortunately, the scales have a high affinity cost of 8 yellow points and a very modest completion bonus of 2 points. To get there, we're going to need a point in yellow at the crossroads, 5 points in the crane, which also gives good resistances, and 3 points in the lion. As you can see, I refunded the points here so that the scales constellation is relying on its own affinity. Once you have that set up, you can start going for vitality damage constellations. I put a point in blue to take the gallows, which gives a small but noticeable boost to vitality damage. After that, I took a point in green for the bat. Twin Fangs is a very nice little lifesteal proc. It goes off quite frequently. Earlier in the game, I had the Jackal active for the red points, so I could take the Wendigo, which has another vitality and lifesteal proc on it. It's worth mentioning that the Revenant up here also has energy leech on it, although it's not quite enough for our purposes. After the Wendigo, I took the Behemoth for the life regen and the green affinity points. Ratosh takes 10 green affinity points, so we need quite a lot of them. To get the remaining green affinity points, I went back to the crossroads, stuck a point in purple to take the Toad. This one is not so powerful, but it gives the right affinity points and a bit of extra vitality damage. With those purple points in place, I could take the Huntress, which gives bleeding resistance reduction. After that, I refunded the Jackal and the points at the crossroads to take Ratosh. Any vitality build is going to take this one for the resistance reduction. Let's go through our gear. This build is based around two MIs that synergize really well, the Spectral Arbalest and the Pakla's Visage. The Arbalest gives 2 extra projectiles to Phantasmal blades and a vitality damage and casting speed bonus to Spectral Binding. The Helm gives crit and bleeding damage to Phantasmal blades. It also gives vitality and bleeding resistance reduction to Siphon souls, along with more damage and extra duration. Together, these MIs make for a very strong character. Our amulet is Kaizen's Eldritch Eye. One of the great things about using Phantasmal blades is that the suffix of butchery can roll on every single piece of jewelry, including amulets, rings, belts, and medals. Between all of those slots, it makes items with bonuses to Phantasmal blades a fairly common drop. I got very lucky with this particular one. The prismatic prefix is very good defensively and gives a lot of resistance. Our first ring is the Signet of the Fallen, with flat vitality damage, casting speed, +2 to Phantasmal blades, and a proc with extra vitality resistance shred. You could easily use 2 of these rings if you happen to have them. In the second slot, we have the Mythical Deathlord's Band, which also has flat vitality damage and casting speed. This one doesn't have resistance shred, but it does boost Blood Boil and Heartseeker, which we're using all the time. And it has its own proc for some extra damage. In our shoulder slot is another MI, the Corvin Pauldrons. The main reason for these is that they convert elemental to vitality damage. You may recall that we have cold damage from the Nether Edge modifier. Unfortunately, this one had the lowest possible damage conversion roll. It goes from 25% to 35% damage converted. But it does have good affixes. Stalwart gives extra defenses, and Of Soul Warding gives +2 to Bone Harvest. You could also use the legendary Bone Wraith Pauldrons in this slot. They also convert elemental to vitality damage. For our gloves and our chest armor, we're using 2 pieces of Valgyr's Hunger. These help to convert the chaos damage from Nether Edge into vitality, and they also scale our vitality and bleeding damage. Our boots are the Mythical Greaves of Ill Omens, which scale vitality damage, give movement speed, and boost Ill Omen and Bone Harvest. Our medal is Namadia's Eye, giving flat vitality and elemental to vitality conversion on Spectral Binding. This comes from the boss in the Barrowholm cellar, so you have to be hostile with Barrowholm to get it. If you have multiple characters, I recommend going hostile on a different character, because this one really loves the vitality damage augments that Barrowholm has. We've got the potent Ravager's Harvest on our weapon. If this is your first character, just go hostile with Barrowholm. The medal is more important than the augments. You can get other vitality damage augments from other factions. Our belt is Luno Valgoth's Waist Guard. This comes from a chthonic boss near the Morndale area. These are quite annoying to farm. It takes a lot of travel to get to the boss, and then when you finally get there, they drop 2 different MIs, so you'll have to make quite a few runs to get the affixes that you want usually. But when you finally do get it, it's pretty great. It completes our chaos to vitality damage conversion, gives +1 to all necromancer skills, and it can roll with all kinds of other cool stuff. I'm using one with the suffix of the Gildum Arcanum so I can cap my skill disruption protection. That stat actually winds up being quite important for a caster, because when you have your skills disrupted, you can't attack at all for several seconds. Before I found this specific belt, I had crafted myself a pair of mythical arcane harmony leggings. These are guaranteed to cap your disruption protection, and they have a big spirit bonus too. As it happened, I wound up using an epic item in the leg slot, the mythical flesh eater leg wraps. I think these are really fun and gruesome and definitely fit the theme of the character. They also give +2 to Anatomy of Murder. And in the metal slot, we have Ouroboric's Reaping, with flat vitality damage, casting speed, and +1 to all necromancer skills. The completion bonus here is quite useful, boosting 2 of our auras. Let's go through some leveling items. Fortunately, our crossbow shows up very early in the game. You're guaranteed to get one from Rowena Kerr in the Arkovian Undercity. The earliest place in the game to find one of these would be from a haunted noble in the Spined Cove near the Arkovian foothills. You're not likely to find one of these in there, but I usually go in anyway for the devotion shrine, so it's worth a look. For your very early levels, you can use any kind of vitality weapon. The blacksmith has a recipe which is guaranteed to give you a vitality implement, so that can yield something like this, the Mystic Preserver Scepter of Decay. That would be perfectly good for low levels. At the blacksmith, you can also craft some Adept's Grips, which give you casting speed, and some Squire's Greaves, which give you movement speed. The relic crafting for this character is quite simple. You'll likely start out with Gluttony at level 25, which you can use to craft a Torment at level 35, a Necrosis at level 60, and your final relic at level 90. For your jewelry slots, as I mentioned, anything can roll with the suffix of Butchery. A good example here is Darius Cronley's Signet. My other ring for some of the leveling process was the Death's Life Seal. This is sold by the Order of Death's Vigil, and since we're playing a Necromancer, we have to side with them. When you get enough reputation, I would definitely pick one of these up. They also sell a chest armor and some other items that boost vitality damage. My leveling amulet was the Death Watcher Pendant, again with the of Butchery suffix. Since we're working with the Order of Death's Vigil, you're not going to see these as a natural drop. You'll have to go to the secret vendor in the Blood Grove who sells them. They can cost a lot of iron, but I think they're worth it. It gives +1 to all necromancer skills and a heal to Call of the Grave. Let's go to an SR run.